Carl Fechner, co-author of the Growing Deep and Strong series and a life coach. Now I want to continue on with the 23rd of May 1990, what took place that was so profound. So I went off to work in this little used car yard, and I had my ex-partner chasing me. I had the CIB, you know, the crime people chasing me for money. It was just a mess. And I was still reflecting on the two books I'd read, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness by Frank Peretti. So somewhere in the early afternoon, I picked up my diary and I started to write to God. Now, if you knew me, you would know that how strange that was. But I knew inside me that I needed to talk to God. So I started off, Dear God, I don't have you clearly in my mind yet. The devil of despair has his claws in me, and it went on and on and on. So as I'm writing and talking to God through writing, the phone rings, and it's my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law, who's the one that was the born-again Christian, and his wife that had been praying for us for the past 12 months. So when he gets on the phone, asks me how I'm going, and it was like I couldn't talk. I don't remember the conversation, but I just knew that it was God answering me because these guys had been praying for us. So I was just in tears, and I couldn't even talk with him, so I ended up hanging up the phone. And I didn't know for years later, but he got off the phone and went, oh, typical Carl, rude, and hung up. I didn't know that for later. But while I'm sitting there with it, this guy walks into the car yard, and he's just a massive guy, like he filled up the doorway. And he walks in and he looks at me and he says, hi, I'm Arthur Rennison. Like he's got this big gruff voice, and he goes, hi, I'm Arthur Rennison. I'm the pastor of the local apostolic church here, and I come to see Karen. And so I look at him and I think, man alive, you know, after what I've read, this is God talking to me again. He's bringing people across my path. So I look at him and I turned my diary around and I said, look what I've just written. So he wrote what I'd written, the Dear God and the rest of the stuff that I'd written. And he said, would you like Jesus in your life? Well, I had no idea what that meant, would you like Jesus in your life? But I knew that I needed God and that he was the answer to what was happening. And so we decided to walk out in the little kitchenette out the back of the office, and he put his hands on my head and he was praying this big prayer, and I don't know what the prayer was. All I know is I had snot and tears going everywhere, and I was just bawling and blubbering my eyes out, and I have no recollection of his prayer. I just knew that this was a day that I wanted to encounter with God. So anyway, I composed myself, and we sat down and had a cup of tea and talked, and he left. So I don't know what sort of time span transpired, but a time went by and a panel beater brought a car back to the yard, and we didn't have any more cars to give to the panel shop. So when I was there on my own, so I just locked up the yard and, running back to his yard, or back to his workshop. So anyway, I drop him off, and I'm still thinking through all of the events that had happened, like so much has happened just so quickly. And I can clearly remember this in my mind. I'm driving back and the sun is setting, and I'm driving in the car, and I can still see myself looking through the windscreen and pondering all that had happened. And out aloud, I said, well, God, I don't know why this man Jesus died. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But I know I'm for you, and I guess I'll find out. And that was where I left it. And so I drove back to the car yard rather, and it was evening, so I started to lock up the cars, and this yard was a gravel yard with all the cars on it. So I'm locking up the cars, and I hear these footsteps behind me, crunch, crunch, crunch on the gravel, and I turn around, and it's this pastor, Arthur Rennison, the guy that had been in earlier, and had prayed for me and was looking for Karen. And I'd already told him that Karen was home sick in bed. And he said, oh, I saw the car outside and I thought Karen was here. But in my mind, I knew that this was God talking to me. I knew that God was there, was answering my question, or was giving me the opportunity to ask the question. So I said to Arthur, I said, well, while you're here, tell me why Jesus died on the cross. And he laughed and he said, well, that's, I can't answer that in a few seconds, but let me explain. Well, I have no idea. I can't remember what he said. But the point that what I understood is that I'd called out for God, that I'd ignored God since I was 20, that I'd turned my back in and said, God, I don't need you, I don't need you. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law prayed for us 12 months. They created an environment through prayer, and God speaks to them and says, go and give them this book, because that's what changed our mindsets, that's what changed our thinking. And then on that day, when I cried out to God, he brought people to me 3 times to clearly demonstrate that he was real and living. And from that day forward, my life has never been the same. And there's lots of miracles and everything else. And in a sense, I felt that I needed to tell you that story to understand why we wrote Growing Deep and Strong. But there's a bit more of the story between Growing Deep and Strong and this encounter that I had on the 23rd of May. But that's for the next video.